Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 17 of Superannuated Starman. I'm your host, Sean Ryan, and today I'll be joined by Chris Duerksen.
Hey, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, man. And I've got Cory Braucks.
Hello.
Today's show is the first of at least 2 episodes where we take a Halloween or horror-themed retro game and revisit our memories. The first game in our month of Halloween horror is Maniac Mansion, initially released on the Commodore 64 and the Apple II. Unlike every other episode where at least one of us has played or owned this game as a kid, none of us have much, and in some cases, no previous experience with this particular title. So most of us are going in pretty fresh. I also had an amazing opportunity to interview Gary Winnick, one of the game's co-creators, and it was amazing to hear him talk about some of the inner workings behind this title. If you haven't heard it yet, go ahead and check it out. It's been available for about a week now, but I haven't really advertised it on Twitter or anything like that because there's a caveat to this interview. We use Zoom to conduct the interview, and that's how I also recorded it. Unfortunately, and unbeknownst to me, there's a time limit that you can record calls through Zoom, and so I had to cut the interview painfully short. I absolutely want to do a follow-up with him and hear everything else he has to say because it seemed like he had so much information to give.
And I do want to jump in here and say thank you to him again. You do a lot of the research, Sean, and I think it's really cool that, Chris and I are just kind of the doofuses that get to come on and riff about games with you. But, to listen to him talk about not just the development of this game, but kind of the behind the scenes of the industry as a whole, and, like how the Scum system developed and his time at like LucasArts and everything else. And I think it was Sierra and a couple other places.
Yeah.
And, just listening to him, like how he came up in the industry and like how things were back in the beginning and working at Skywalker Ranch and stuff. And it was just really cool to listen to someone kind of talk about that sort of thing and how things worked back in the day. So I just was really appreciative to hear that sort of take on it and kind of get that history that I otherwise wouldn't have had.
I would love to get him on Skype, hit record, and just let him go. And hopefully I'll get the chance to do that. But with all that out of the way, let's enjoy some music from the NES soundtrack, and when we come back, we'll discuss the history of Maniac Mansion. This game recently turned 35 years old as it released on October 5th of 1987 on the Commodore 64 and the Apple II. The NES port was released in June of '88 in Japan, September of 1990 in North America, and October of '92 in Europe. This game was also ported to many other older PCs, such as the Amiga and the Atari ST. This was Lucasfilm Games' first self-published product, but would not be its last, as it would go on to produce and publish games from the Monkey Island series, several Indiana Jones titles, as well as one of my favorites, Full Throttle. Lucasfilm Games later renamed to LucasArts, and they developed the script creation utility for Maniac Mansion, also known as SCUM. That's SCUM with two M's. This was a hybrid video game engine and programming language that allowed designers to create locations, items, and dialogue sequences without writing code in the language in which the game's source code ends up. This also allowed the game's script and data files to be cross-platform. There's a lot of information solely about SCUM, so if you're interested, head to Google and search for SCUM, that's SCUM with two M's. The game was conceived in 1985 by Ron Gilbert and Gary Winnick, who wanted to tell a comedic story based on horror films and B-movie cliches. Ron Gilbert was actually the one that created the SCUM engine, along with two other programmers, David Fox and Carl May. Gary talked briefly about David and Carl and a little bit about Ron in that interview I had, so again, go ahead and check that out. Though the game received highly positive reviews from critics, it wasn't a huge commercial success, and through the years it's built its following and cult classic status. The game was successful enough that it solidified Lucasfilm as a serious competitor to Sierra Online. You may remember Sierra from such games as King's Quest and Leisure Suit Larry. There was also a 3-season TV series of the same name, and the game received a direct sequel, Day of the Tentacle, which released 6 years later in 1993. Side note, the theme song, The Maniac Mansion, the television show, is very, very weird. It's about a minute long, so I'm going to put it in right here.
Glimmer of a dream to bravely sail uncharted seas, taking chances we never know. The highs and lows will take the lot, and right before our eyes we'll find happiness and peace of mind. Maniac mansion.
There's some interesting history regarding the NES and Famicom ports of the game. In fact, the Japanese Famicom port is an entirely different game from what the rest of the world received. Some differences include characters were redrawn in a cute art style, there was no scrolling present in the game, leading to rooms larger than a single screen to be displayed via flip screens. Many of the background details are missing, and instead of a save feature, a password over 100 characters long is required to save your progress.
Good lord.
The NES port is much closer to the original game in comparison. The SCUM engine had to be modified, and the graphics had to be entirely redrawn to match the NES's display resolution. Due to Nintendo's policies, the game was significantly censored, including what they deemed inappropriate content, particularly profanity and nudity. However, the nudity in question was a swimsuit calendar, a classical sculpture, and a poster of a mummy in a playmate pose. All three were removed from the game. When the game was finally approved, 250,000 cartridges were manufactured. One aspect of the game involves microwaving a hamster that did remain in the game. However, when Nintendo later noticed, and after the first batches of cartridges had gone out and were sold, Jaleco was forced to remove the content from future shipments. But one plus for the NES version is that it did get a battery backup save over that ridiculously long password feature of the Famicom version. Some quick info about the storyline to Maniac Mansion. At the start of the game, our hero, Dave Miller, finds that his girlfriend, Sandy Pants, has been abducted by Dr. Fred Edison. And another interesting fact is that the Edison name isn't anywhere in the game. That came about because of that TV show that I mentioned earlier.
Oh, so it came out after the fact?
Yeah.
Hmm.
So Dave, sets out to save her with two of his friends. From the intro screen, you can select two of your friends to help you through the game. You have the option of choosing Bernard Bernoulli, a cowardly nerd who would later become the main character of the game's sequel, Razor, a female punk rocker, Wendy, an aspiring novelist, Jeff Woody, a surfer, Sid, a new wave musician, and Michael Stopp, a photographer. So everyone has unique skills with the exception of Razor and Sid. Razor and Sid are both musicians and have the exact same abilities. One is male, one is female. That's the only difference.
And don't forget to mention the fact that Dave has no skills at all.
None. But he is the required party member.
Yeah.
So because each character contributes different skills and resources, some examples, like I said, Sid and Razor, the musicians, can play instruments while Bernard can repair appliances. Gilbert and Winnick spent months working on event combinations that could occur in the game. The game may be completed with any combination of characters, but since many puzzles are solvable only by certain characters, different paths must be taken on the characters that you chose to complete one of the 5 possible endings. Lastly, a little bit of trivia here. While there were games before this that had cutscenes, some older ones are Space Invaders, Donkey Kong, Pac-Man. This was the first game to actively use the term cutscene. Here's what it says in the game's manual for the PC. Cutscenes are short, animated sequences like scenes from a movie which can provide clues and information about the characters. When you're viewing a cutscene, you do not interact with the action, so the text below the animation window disappears. That's crazy that not only did these guys create one of the first point and click games, it's not. Point and click existed 3 years before this, but they coined the term cutscene.
Yeah.
So I think that's going to wrap up the history. Let's take another break, and when we come back, we're going to hear from Chris about why he chose this game to kick off our retro Halloween. Stick around. Welcome back, everyone. A few weeks ago, Chris suggested that we play Maniac Mansion to kick off October. Chris, do you have any history with this game? And if so, why don't you tell us about it? And if you don't have any, why did you pick this particular game?
I have absolutely no history at all with this. I picked the game just because of the I don't know, the legend it has become. It's been referenced in a bunch of other games. Back when in my early 20s, when like retro gaming became cool again, or cool the first time, you know what I mean.
Isn't that sad that we are only nearing our 40s, but retro gaming has become cool, uncool, and then cool again?
Yeah, I mean, well, I mean, I think about this. I mean, like back in our early 20s, that like to me, I'm thinking early 2000s. When we were playing these games the first time around 10 years before that, that wasn't retro gaming, that was just gaming. And and then so 10 years later, like that's the first time the term retro gaming even was being thrown around. And it was games like this and Mega Man and old school Mario and old NES and Atari games. And but yeah, when retro gaming started becoming a thing that I was aware of, everybody mentioned Maniac Mansion. It's a groundbreaking game because it was LucasArts' first independent game that they were self-published, whatever. It's just seemed like it had a lot of good history to it. Plus, it kind of definitely hit the Halloween theme of being, a parody of every cheesy slasher flick. So I just thought that'd be a good fit.
It definitely hits on all those aesthetics.
Yeah.
Cory, what about you? Do you have any history with this?
I do not have any history with this particular title. I do have a long and loving history of LucasArts titles. And it was really interesting to play this one being the progenitor of the Scum series, because I think a lot of us know Monkey Island and
Yeah.
Full Throttle's one of my favorites, and Sam and Max, and the old Indiana Jones games as well. And actually to see Chuck the Plant pop up in this was really entertaining to me, because Chuck the Plant is also something you can find in, I want to say it's Raiders of the Lost Ark. You can see it in his study, after the room gets ransacked, and Indy ends up picking around the room. So it was kind of funny to see that was a callback to this.
Oh, Chuck the Plant is in a lot of stuff.
Yeah, I know he's in a lot of stuff, but that's where I specifically remember him from. So it's funny to see that it's a continuing thing, and this is one of the first places to see him.
That's really interesting that you brought up some of those other LucasArts games, because I don't have any memories with Maniac Mansion, not directly. I do have some memories, but I never actually played it. I had a friend when I was younger, and I'm sure I've mentioned him on the show. His name's John Thompson. He and his father were very into the early days of PC scene, and video games were a common thing in their household. And I can remember watching him play, and John was also the person that got me into Full Throttle and really point and click as a whole. So, like I said before, we don't have a ton of history with this game. So, all bulk here is going to be us replaying Maniac Mansion today. So, let's take yet another break. We're going to get some more music from Maniac Mansion in here. And when we come back, we're going to discuss what it's like playing Maniac Mansion in 2022. So it's been 35 years since this game initially released, and here we are replaying it in the same month it came out, 35 years later. Chris, you're the one that wanted to play this game. You chose it for this episode. So what version of the game did you play? Did you play the PC port, or did you play the NES version?
I played NES.
Okay.
And first off, I just want to throw. Actually, no. What about you, Cory? What'd you play it on?
I also played the NES port.
Sean?
So I started with the PC version, but I played it a very weird way. So I initially played it on the PlayStation 5. If you own Day of the Tentacle Remastered by Double Fine, within the first 10 minutes of the game, you'll gain access to Ed Edison's room. And if you use the computer, you can play the original Maniac Mansion.
Oh, that's cool.
Mm-hmm.
I played this for about an hour or so, and the frustration of using a controller for point and click was too much for me. So I went to Steam. I spent the $6 so I could use my mouse.
And that's what I was going to ask, because, oh my God, I wish I had a mouse. It's like, ah.
Yeah, the convenience of it was worth $6 to me.
Yeah.
I think the game is just worth $6 after playing it.
Oh, yeah, for sure. For sure.
Totally.
So Chris, yeah, go ahead, start us off.
Okay. Well, I started playing it, and I was talking to you guys. I was talking a big game about, don't be a little and get a walkthrough, like it's going to this like the way it's meant to be. And I got stuck in the basement with all three characters. I don't know, probably a couple hours of playing through. And
Who did you pick on your first playthrough?
on my first playthrough, I was obviously Dave, Wendy. Wendy's the journalist, right?
Correct.
And then Razor. I wanted to go for the cheesy guy and two girls because I knew it was like a parody of a slasher film, so I wanted like the two female victims and Dave and I did not. Oh my gosh, I had no idea what I was doing. I literally had no idea what I was doing. I was exploring every room that I had access to. Um, and finally, I don't know. After I'll admit it took like a good hour before my first character got locked in the basement. I can't remember which one it was. I think it was
An
actually
hour?
an hour of actual playtime. But that's also
I got
me
someone
being
locked in the basement almost immediately. I went into the kitchen
Yeah.
and I got caught.
really.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I never ran into anybody in the kitchen. Was that in the cutscene where the kid wanted to go down for a snack or something like that?
No, Edna came and grabbed me
Yeah,
at the
n-
beginning of mine.
Oh
yeah,
wow,
Nurse,
yeah.
Nurse Edna is right there.
For me, I didn't get caught until I was exploring the rooms and opened Nurse Edna's room and went in there. And then she jumped my case and threw me down the basement. And then the second character ended up being I can't remember how the second one ended up. I think the doctor himself caught me just coming out after one of his cutscenes or something. And then I purposely threw the third one in there because I was like, okay, maybe you need all three people to get out or something, which is
Well, did you
not the
figure it out?
case.
How to get out?
I figured it out thanks to YouTube. like, and that's pretty much. I was hardcore about not using any walkthroughs until that happened, and then I was like, okay, I'm gonna cheat just a little bit for this. So then I looked up how to, because that was the other thing. I did figure out, like obviously, like when you're locked in the dungeon, there's the locks you can interact with on both the doors, and then there's the secret brick. And I found the secret brick all by myself. And I thought, oh, okay, if I just push a secret brick and have one person pushing it, it's going to open one of the doors. And I thought it would do that, kind of like how it does this. When you first go in the gargoyle head, like if you push the gargoyle head, the door just stays open the whole time. So I figured, okay, like I pushed the secret brick, I could hear the clicking sound. I knew something was happening, but every time I switched to a different character, like nothing was going on. The doors were still locked and everything. So I ended up going on YouTube and figuring out, oh, the secret brick opens the door for a split second, and you have to be real quick to switch that character to get out. Like you have to
It's
have
little
a
faster
character.
than a split second, but yeah, you basically have to have someone ready to go. Like, so you push it.
Oh, you have to have
switch
somebody ready to go, and
characters.
you have to have precise mouse moving skills in order to switch to a new kid, switch to the right kid, and then
I don't
click
know
on
if
the
it's
door
that
right away.
bad.
Oh, it was for me. It took
So-
me several tries, even after knowing the trick. It took me several tries in order to get somebody out through that door.
I've played a lot of point and click adventure games, so pixel hunting was not something new to me. So when I got stuck in the dungeon, I immediately started clicking on everything and found that brick not too long into it. But similarly, I was by myself and I couldn't get out.
Yeah.
So I had to wait until someone else got caught and then I used that.
But anyways, after that initial dungeon thing, that's when I re-rolled and started a new game. Tried different characters because
Because you got
'cause-
stuck.
yeah, I didn't know what to do. Like I had no idea what to do.
I
All
did the
three of 'em-
same. I restarted several times.
and even after I got two of the characters out of the dungeon, I still didn't know. I didn't know how to get the third one out. And then I was still just wandering around the exact same rooms I had already been around. My pockets were full of every item I came across. I grabbed all the.
Like
I grabbed.
do.
Yeah, exactly. I grabbed the chainsaw. I was flipping switches. I was, opening the microwave. I was, like I was doing literally everything, and I had no idea what to do. And that's when I kept it to myself. Oh, actually, no, I did tell you guys that I started using walkthrough. I started using a walkthrough to show me what the key items were and what they did, so that way you could kind of piece it together. But even that, I will admit I'm too big of a dum dum to figure it out by myself. So yeah, I resorted to using a walkthrough to help me through this game because I didn't want to torture myself playing it. So
And I think that's fair.
and plus and to be fair, had I been 10 years old, 12 years old playing this game and had no walkthrough, but this would have been one of 10 games I had in my rotation, so I would have been able to sink a lot more time into it. And this game would have been great for that. Like this game would have been one of those fun things that, a couple times a week where you pop it in and see if you can make any progress. Like this one would have been really fun to compare notes with your friends on how to progress and how they're doing everything. Like, and it was at that point when I kind of realized myself, I'm like, okay, I've only got 2 weeks to get through this thing before we do our podcast.
I think using a walkthrough when we're on a time constraint is a little more forgiving. And to kind of further your point, I think one of the cool things about this game is the fact that you do have multiple characters, so there are specific things you can interact with.
Mm-hmm.
So, you have your extra people, and there are 3 different endings because of them, I believe. And then you have like 2 other endings that you can do just because of the way the game works.
Well, you have the bad ending.
Well, you also have the bad ending. So yeah, there's I guess 6 different ways you can do it.
Wait, what's the bad ending?
Oh, you can blow yourself up.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
You know this.
That's how I did it the first time. I was like,
yeah.
I was joking when I sent you guys a screenshot of that. I'm like, oh well, beat the game.
Yeah,
but
I drained the pool and I was like, oh, that's not good.
Was it draining the pool? I think.
Yeah,
I think
you had the red button.
No, yeah, I hit the red button and blew the house up.
And you need liquid from the pool.
Yeah.
At least for what I did.
Yeah, so there are several ways to kind of screw yourself. One thing is if you drain the pool and just leave it drained, you will eventually have it explode after a certain amount of time just because the reactor goes off. And then you can drain the pool and go down there and hit the button, and that will blow the whole thing up as well. Or you can go down there, you can drain the pool, go down, and you can actually end up killing yourself by having another character fill the pool while you're down there.
Yeah.
So, there are several ways to die.
Should we paint a picture for everybody really quick of the general layout of the house, so that way they know what we're talking about?
Well, let's kind of describe what the story is. I briefly talked about where you have Sandy Pants. She's been kidnapped, but the backstory is that 5 years ago there was a meteor.
I thought it was 20.
It was 20?
It doesn't matter. There's
a
time where a magic meteor comes down and it mind controls the scientist guy.
Yep, you're right. It was 20 years ago, but the doctor has been in the basement for the last 5 years. That's where I got.
By the way, just to derail it really quick, the guy eventually comes out of the basement and he goes upstairs and he's like, "Hey, I need to flip the switch on the power because I'm having an issue with one of my things." And the wife is like, "You've been downstairs for 5 years and that's all you've got to say to me."
And hey, let's also, so this guy, the meteor started mind controlling this guy for 20 years, and they have like an 8-year-old son. Think about that.
Is that how old he is?
I have no. I'm guessing that. I mean, it is a young kid, and the kid hates the meteor.
If he's really that young, I thought he was much older.
I thought he was like a teenager.
Still, he's younger than 20. I'm just saying that kid was conceived with the meteor calling the shots.
That's a young kid to be killing people because, spoilers, if you use Sid or Razor to put his hamster in the microwave and present the remains to him, he will kill your character.
Oh, how? How does he do it? I never saw that.
It just like shows a cutscene of a little, I can't remember if it's a tombstone or a cross with rip on it, but he kills your character afterwards.
Yeah, and when your character dies, they bury you in the front yard.
Yeah, it's permadeath.
Yeah. Anyways, okay, so the story. Yeah. Anyways, the meteor comes in, mind controls this accomplished scientist, and then
In air quotes.
yeah, and then how did Sandy even end up in the picture? I can't remember. Like, was she selling magazines or something? Like, how did she end up there?
I don't know. I think it's just one of those. He decided to kidnap someone.
Oh, because doesn't he needed?
I don't know, like the meteor is like sucking out her brain or something.
Yeah, he
like
needs her brain energy.
It's all a
or-
MacGuffin.
yeah,
Like it's all just the way to get you inside, basically.
and Sandy is your stereotypical hot captive with little
She's the
clothing,
hot blonde
and
chick, yeah.
yeah, she's the hot blonde chick that is the boyfriend. Her boyfriend's the stud and the hero of the.
Who's completely useless and has
Yeah.
he's completely useless, which I didn't find out until much later because I was investing everything. Like I was using him to pick up everything and carry everything on him, and then come to find out, yeah, he's got no skills at all. But anyways, so yeah,
He's the one I left in the dungeon pretty much permanently.
Yep, that's what I did after I was like, oh, he doesn't do anything cool.
I'll go on to yeah, I invested too much in him, thinking that okay, he's the main guy, so he must
Nope,
have
he's
to do
totally
something.
Worthless.
Yes.
Well,
he's
Chris,
the
why
only
don't
one
you-
with like a backstory too.
Well, Chris, why don't you pause for a second? And Cory, what does your early game look like?
My first run, because I ended up doing 2 sets of characters. I used one of the rockers. I think it was like Sid or whoever it was, and I think I used Bernard, who's the nerd dude. And I ended up playing through for a little bit, and I got my first like capture, and I figured out how the whole like jail system works because I too have a long history of playing these sorts of games. And as soon as I kind of figured all that out, and like you could switch between characters, I ended up playing through to the point where I got to the car and I shot the car into space on accident. And then I was like, oh, I probably like got stuck. And so then I started just screwing around until I ended up, I think, draining the pool. And I was like, well, let's see what this does. And then it blew me up. And I realized I hadn't saved for quite some time. So I just made a new game with new characters. And
I want to ask you both a question really quick. And this is skipping to the end. The meteor, how did you guys quote unquote kill it?
so my second playthrough, I used Wendy and the surfer guy. And Wendy's the one who's like the aspiring writer. So if you get the manuscript, you can punch it up basically, and you can offer it to the meteor, and he gets a writing contract out of it. And that's how I ended up beating the game, by making the meteor a like critically acclaimed writer, and you're on like Jay Leno or whatever it is at the end.
So you can also kill the meteor by putting him in the trunk of that car and then ejecting him into space.
What?
Yeah, I found that out afterwards. Yeah, like you can open the trunk. I watched a couple of the other like games online afterwards. But yeah, you can pop the trunk and then put the meteor inside of the trunk and just fire him off into space. And he ends up like driving the car through space.
What about you, Chris?
So I use Bernard, who gets the pass or the badge. Sorry, the badge from the Meteor Police, and or was the Meteor was already gone at that point. The Meteor Police came down and arrested the Meteor, didn't they? And took him back to space, right?
I didn't get that
Wait,
ending.
yeah. You didn't get that ending. So yeah, okay. So with Bernard, one of his options is that he can repair things, and he repaired this interstellar radio that I was able to contact them because, like, you remember the one poster like up in the doctor's room? There's the one poster and said, if you see this thing, call this number. Well, Bernard can fix the radio in there, and you can call the number from that radio, and it calls the meteor police who are chilling up on the moon, and they come down, arrest the meteor, and take him back out to space. And I don't know what happens to the meteor after that, but then the meteor's gone and not a problem anymore. It's not the ending though. I mean, do you want to know my actual ending?
Oh, that's not the ending?
No, the meteor police take the meteor, but then when you go down to rescue Sandy, the purple tentacle, who is like the doctor's muscle, is waiting, like trying to stop you. You flash the badge. The purple tentacle totally flips on the guy, flips on the doctor, squeals, runs off, runs away. You go in there. The doctor's like, "Well, hey, um, uh, I'm just gonna blow us all up." He starts a shutdown sequence, and then you basically have to disarm it. And then after you disarm it, his mind control fades, and he apologizes, and everybody goes on to live a happy life.
Yeah, the mind control thing, like the 2 minute self destruct or whatever. I
Mhm.
don't know if that's for every ending, but I got that as well, where I had like 2 minutes to go and stop the meteor, basically. So I think that's just sort of a thing he does when you end up like cornering him in his room.
Yeah, I had 2 minutes, and so I died one of the times by what you had mentioned earlier. If you're inside the pool and you refill it, you die. And so I put the meteor inside the pool and refilled it.
Oh, that's great.
What? You can actually pick the meteor up?
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's how
Oh,
we were talking
cool.
about putting him in the car.
yeah, you can carry him to the car. You can do what I did, which was put him in the pool. Apparently, there's another way to get rid of him, which is to feed him to Chuck the plant.
Oh, that's I got my
Is it
I got my
feeding him to
revenge
Chuck, or
stolen
is
from
it
me.
feeding him to the big blue guy upstairs? Blue plant.
The what I read was just Chuck the plant.
Okay.
I don't know. I didn't do it. Like I said, I put him in the pool.
I had to use for my game. I had to use the big blue plant. The blue plant turns into a ladder, basically.
Yes. Yeah,
So
there's a lot of like obscure weird puzzles, which is a hallmark of this series, especially with LucasArts, but there's so many just useless junk items that you can end up picking up. Like there's like rotten cabbages and like week old turkey on the table, and
yeah, so
you
many.
mentioned the
I fed all that
chainsaw.
to the tentacle.
So
Yeah,
did
like
I.
like you can give them like wax fruit and a can of Pepsi, and there's a Pepsi machine in the doctor's
Turns out the wax fruit.
office.
I gave him the wax fruit. Just like I'm like, okay, like I gave him the wax fruit on my first playthrough. I fed him everything, and he was still hungry the whole time. The second playthrough, I had the wax fruit on me, and I gave it to him first, and turns out that's his favorite food.
Yeah, he goes, wax fruit, that's my favorite.
That's my favorite. And then I gave him a can of Pepsi, and he was thrilled. Like,
Yeah, for
whereas
you at
the
home, it's literally a can of Pepsi. It's
yeah,
not just
and
like
there is
cola.
there is a Pepsi machine down the bottom, and if you use the Pepsi yourself on yourself, like you use the Pepsi, it's like delicious, like
Yeah,
or
you can
refreshing or something.
you can get a quarter at some point, and you can buy a Pepsi out of the machine, and it's like ice cold Pepsi.
Yeah.
If I get the chance to talk to Gary again, I'm going to ask him if there were any paid endorsements for the product placement.
Or if they were just like, we like drinking it, so we put it in the game.
Yeah, maybe that's how they got through all those late nights figuring all this out.
Maybe it's kind of like how like Ninja Turtles has the Pizza Hut references in
Well,
there.
that was definitely a cross promotion for Pizza Hut.
Yeah, don't you remember there was a coupon for a free pizza with those games?
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah.
We were talking about how you could go to Pizza Hut and you could get like the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles bonuses and stuff.
But back to this, I didn't have the music with swapping between each characters. I played it on Steam. Maybe that was just a problem that I had, but I really had a problem with the lack of music in this game. But I did later on check out the Nintendo version, and I'm kind of skipping ahead. And it was every time you swap characters, you got a brand new theme song.
Yep.
Oh, that so you didn't get that in on your version? Because that was
No.
actually one of the things I thought was very clever. Because like every time, yeah, each character has their own theme song, and that was a good way for me to know, oh, who's like what character am I on? Like, especially when they're staying both in the same room. But it kind of,
I know you
as
can
weird as
shut
it
the
sounds.
music off by like using like the Walkman in your inventory.
Oh, I was
So I
wondering
don't
why
know
they all
if you
had.
just did that on accident, maybe.
Oh my god, for real? Okay. Okay.
Is that why they all had
Yeah,
in
they all have
on
like
CD players?
yeah,
Yeah.
cassette players on them.
God, man. I can't wait for final thoughts because I have a lot to talk about when we get there. But I can you get soft locked? I mean, they spent so much time figuring out all these combinations, but like, I had a hard time getting past the tentacle initially. I
Um, I
gave
I think you can, especially if you end up getting a character killed off, because there's certain
yeah,
combinations that. So if you're using two of the music people or whatever, and you end up getting like one of them killed off, like I don't know if you can go on.
What or what about what if you got them killed and they had key items in their pockets?
Well, that's also what I'm saying. Like if
oh
they
yeah.
don't have stuff with them, like I think you might be able to just get yourself soft locked that way.
Oh my gosh. So we need to get we still haven't described the set for this for everybody. So
It's a
Well,
mansion.
let's explain soft lock, and then we'll talk about that. So soft locking is where you, through a series of events, whether intentional or unintentional, you create a situation that you cannot win the game. You're
Yeah,
stuck. And in
can't
some games,
progress any further.
yeah, in some games you might be just stuck in the same room, or maybe on it could be like a pixel that you get caught in.
I
Whereas
mean,
like
I know it's popular. Like some people do it on Pokemon, where they'll do things like they'll release the one guy that has Surf or whatever, and then they're stuck on an island, and then they can't go any further now because their Pokemon that they do have can't learn Surf. Like there's ways to do it in other games, but that's the
perfect
example that comes to
example.
my head.
So Chris, tell us about the mansion.
all right. So the whole story, like we mentioned the meteor mind controlling and Dave showing up to rescue Sandy and picking your two comrades um, and teammates. You start off outside of the mansion, and your job is to obviously get inside into this big spooky looking mansion. And which, by the way, I don't know if this came up in the interview with the one guy, but that mansion was actually modeled off of
Skywalker Ranch.
Lucas Ranch. It this house was actually modeled
Skywalker
off
Ranch.
Skywalker. Thank you, God. Um, that this house in the game was modeled off the mansion on in Skyrock Rocker.
Skyrocker Land.
Yep,
I think we all get the idea.
and some of the rooms being exact replicas of the rooms in the actual mansion. But anyways, so it's a 4-story mansion with a basement. On the first floor, you had your main hallway. You've got the kitchen, pantry, an exit to a pool and a garage. What else? A library, right?
Yes.
Am I missing anything else?
Uh,
Oh, and your access way to the dungeon, which also has like the furnace and circuit breakers and stuff in there. But yeah, I mean, it's not like it is definitely a weird house. You go up to the second story and there's like a big metal door right away that you see with the what's on the second story? Do you guys remember?
well, there's like the arcade is one of those, isn't it?
So
Right.
you talking the second story? Are you talking there's the first floor and then the stairway and then that first story
Oh,
up?
the second story has Dr.
Yeah,
Fred's office,
yeah, yeah.
which
You have the room with the wax fruit.
yep, it's got an arcade in it, like an arcade with a few like little games and an air hockey table.
Yeah,
Then it's also got access to it's got more stairs. It takes you up to the tentacles room. No, sorry, not the tentacles room. The tentacle where you first encounter the green tentacle, which is the friendly one. And in the on that third floor, the only thing on the third floor, I believe, um is the landing where the tentacle is, and then also the dark room for if you pick the photographer.
Yeah, there's a whole floor for the development.
Yeah, and then the fourth floor is everybody's bedrooms, um, including a bathroom with a mummy in the shower,
Did you
access to the attic.
did you use the surfer guy at any point?
No, I did not.
Oh, so real fun fact, if you get the surfer guy, he can repair the telephone down in the library. and there's the mummy in the bathroom has got a thing there. And it says like call
Oh.
Edna, and it lists the number.
Yeah, I had
And you
Bernard, so
can-
Bernard does the same thing. Yeah,
Oh, okay. Yeah, you can fix the phone and you can crank call Edna with it. So
and she thinks that you and when you call her from the library with the repaired phone, she thinks that you're Uncle Ted, the dead guy in the shower. She's like, "Oh, I've been waiting to hear from you for so long," and then and that's actually one of the that's actually one of the ways to advance your story is that you have to call, and she gets so distracted by being on the phone because she just rambles on and on and on about what's going on with the catching up with the old times or whatever, that you're able to sneak through her room.
yeah, that's one of the other ways instead of getting thrown in the dungeon, having someone else slip in.
Yeah, I always sacrificed a character to get locked up. But further
But-
up, on like what would be the 5th floor, there's the room with the giant stereo in it. And this is just a little Easter egg. There's a poster that says like I'm a tour rocker. And if you check it out, it says something about like Ron Gilbert being on tour.
Yeah,
I can't remember exactly what it is.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like 1987 Ron Gilbert World Tour.
But to sum all that up, so this mansion has basically 5 stories.
It's big.
And it's big. Basically, the easiest way to sum that up is, it's got a complete variety of rooms, and you basically have to use all of them, and you have to switch between characters, and like I said, like we kept mentioning the pool. There's a pool outside that you can only get access through by going through the house. So this whole story takes place going through this big luxurious mansion with lots of Easter eggs and lots of red herrings and I don't know. Would you even call them traps? I would call them traps.
Some of them, maybe, but a lot of them are just red herrings. They're useless items, like the chainsaw
Yeah.
without fuel and stuff like that.
And also, I mean, and there's also obviously like if how many characters are in this game, or how many? There's 6 people you can choose from besides Dave, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And with the exception of Sid and Razor, they are all unique characters that can all beat the game with their own way.
I don't know if Surfer Dude has a way to beat the game.
I think all surfer guy could do. What is his name? Jeff? Is that it? Luke? What? I don't.
think it's Jeff.
So I'm looking right here. Yeah, Jeff Woody, the surfer. I think his only big skill is that he can repair that phone.
Well, you can also. I don't know if he's the only one that can do it. Uh-oh.
Well, I think Bernard can also fix things.
Yeah, Bernard. Yeah, Bernard can fix everything.
But I don't think he's the only one that can use it. But there's like the buff machine in the building, and he can use the buff machine.
Oh no, I think everybody can use the buff machine, because once I discovered the buff machine, like I said, I invested way too heavily into Dave. He was the first one. Dave found the buff machine first, and I made him buff, which makes. There's only 2 things that, as far as I can tell, in my story, there are only 2 things that actually require the buff machine. Which, by the way, the buff machine is just, man, what were those?
Like a Bowflex type of thing.
A Bowflex. Thank you. That's what I was gonna call it. It was a Bowflex indoor gym.
You can use Jeff to use the Bowflex basically, and he can lift the garage door up, and then he can also like open up one of the grates to go into the basement. So,
Yeah.
Yeah.
But on my game, I had Dave use the buff machine first, and he got ripped, so he was able to open up.
Okay, so I didn't know if other characters could use it or not because I used.
And then I even had.
Can
Bernard
more than
use it
one
too.
character use it?
Yes. Yeah. I had both Bernard and Dave use it in the same playthrough.
That was my question. Okay.
Okay.
So I assume if Bernard can use it, because he is the timid dork. If he can use it, I assume anybody can use it.
Fair.
All right.
Fair assumption.
out. Like you have 4 or 5 floors. There's an attic and a basement, and not every room is required for every character because, like, obviously you don't need the dark room if you're not the photographer and stuff like that. But every room basically has a purpose. And so, depending on the characters you pick and the ways that you progress through the mansion, there are like 5 or 6 different endings to this game. So, for the size of the game, it's really like well thought out and interesting. And like, there's
It is,
just a
yeah, it
lot
is
of time
very
to waste
involved.
in it. I think I probably sank about 6 hours.
Yeah, I put more time than I wanted to in this, and I shouldn't say that I wanted to because I had a great time doing it,
Oh, yeah.
but I was just getting so frustrated, just getting nowhere because
Oh,
some of the puzzles are a little obtuse. And you, Cory, you may know of this. Are you guys familiar with the infamous cat hair mustache puzzle?
Not off the top of my head, but I probably know it.
Okay,
is that
so
from this game?
it no, it's not from this game. It's from a 1999 adventure game called Gabriel Knight 3: Blood of the Sacred, Blood of the Damned. The player has to solve a puzzle that involves disguising the main protagonist, Gabriel
Okay,
Knight.
yeah, he puts like he poses as a detective, doesn't he?
Yeah, he
Yeah,
has
okay.
to create a disguise.
Yes.
And in order to create this disguise, he decides to place like double-sided tape on the side of a door and then spray a cat with a hose. And then the cat will run past the tape and tear some of its hair out, attaching itself to the tape that you use to create a mustache for yourself to use to make a disguise. It's so convoluted, and the puzzles weren't nearly that bad in this game, but some of them are a little out there.
I think LucasArts has a history of doing that as well. Like I can remember Monkey Island, for example, where you end up getting a rubber chicken from like the voodoo lady, and that rubber chicken is used as a zip line to go between like the melee and Monkey Island, and it's just like I wouldn't
Who
have
would have
thought
thought
of
of that?
that.
Yeah.
But it's just something like where like it's just discovered through trial and error of just trying every single item on every like piece of scenery you can, and it's just one of those obscure things that they do as developers.
And I will admit that is ultimately what led me to using the walkthrough, the
Well,
full
yeah,
walkthrough
because
on
there's
this
so
game.
many like little like things that's like I wouldn't have thought of using the hamster on the thing or using the jar on the pool water because it's radioactive, stuff like that.
Yeah, and for me, the moment was because I used the like I said, my first hint that I looked up was how to get out of the dungeon when you're locked in there. The second hint that I looked up afterwards, I'm like, okay, well, how do you get the out of the, like where's the key for the dungeon? And I looked up how to get the key for the dungeon, and it was way more involved of a process than I ever would have guessed on my own. Which for my playthrough, and spoiler alert if you haven't played the game, like this is gonna help you out. Like at least like for my playthrough, I had to use Bernard. I had to go up to the tentacles room, get the record out of the tentacles room, which is like basically the fourth and a half floor. Go back down the first floor, get a cassette tape that is hidden in a panel on the in a hidden panel. You go up to the third floor, second floor. Use the cassette tape in the tape recorder. Put the record on the record player. Hit record on the tape deck. Hit play on the record player, and then it plays this glass shattering sound. Because the record is apparently it's like a mating call for the tentacles or something. And then
What?
yeah, and
Is that what destroys the chandelier?
yes,
Because that's where the key is.
yes, and to get
Oh, okay.
the but to get the key you have to record that thing up on the third second whatever the entertainment room. Hit stop on the cassette tape. Grab the cassette tape again. Take that back down to the first floor in the dining room where the chandelier is. There's a cassette player in there. You have to put it in there, hit play, and then it breaks all the windows and drops the chandelier, which is where the key is. And that was when I was like, Sean, without a walkthrough, you are never going to find this because, especially
I
like,
just lifted a key from Edna's room. Like, I don't think I had to go through all that.
Yeah, I did not do that.
oh my god, are you serious? Like, there's more
Yeah.
than one key for the
Yeah.
because the key I got for the dungeon is the that was up on the chandelier
No,
was called the old rusty key.
no, I don't think I had that when I had like the silver key or whatever it was. Like,
Oh, see, for me, I thought the silver key was the one that was
well,
like
whatever color
to
it
the
was,
pool house.
there's a bunch of keys, and like I
Oh my
just
gosh,
used a
yeah, and
different
yeah,
one.
there's like 6 different color kinds of keys, and yeah, I got and up until the point, yeah, I was basically the way I was getting around that house was trying every key on every door.
Which, like you do.
Yeah, and using a D-pad to do that was
Ugh.
awful. It was.
Yeah, I
Now,
mean, just to kind of summarize, like these games are for people with a lot of patience and kind of creativity. So if you're
totally.
really looking for like a straight run through, like this is not the title for you. But if you're looking for like some comedy and some like interesting storytelling and just weirdness, like that's definitely what these games are about.
Yeah,
And you need to be patient. You need to be okay with getting stuck and not having any idea what to do.
and like I said, this would have been a great game. Like, could you imagine being in college in 1990 when this game came out and playing this with your college buddies? Or
87 was the first release of this, I believe.
yeah, like I mean, this game was definitely not catered for young children. This was for the young adult crowd,
Yeah, this
and
is college kids screwing off and having fun.
or even just dorky dads and stuff.
Well,
Like
yeah, but
yeah,
it's to that like kind of 16 plus range basically.
yeah, totally.
It's not for your average like 9-year-old with a Nintendo.
And I would have loved to have like and I mean there weren't other games that were comparable to this, but as far as storytelling and kind of like role playing, not role playing in like in a Skyrim
Yeah,
sense,
right.
but yeah, but like as
Adventure
for
games.
for an early adventure role playing game, like this was definitely a step up from your text based Zork, like
Yeah.
what else was there? Like
I'm glad you brought up Zork, and I have something to say, but go ahead and finish your thought.
oh no, I'm just saying like it's easy for us to kind of joke about like the difficulty scale and the absurdity of this game, but back when there was your other option was Zork, like this was I'm sure this was a breath of fresh air,
Okay, so I have 2 points to make, and the first is kind of piggybacking on what you were talking about, Chris, when you talk about it being a breath of fresh air. This wasn't the first point and click adventure, and I'm trying to pull up that information right now. The first one, uh, hold on, I'm looking it up because it was something I brought up in that interview with Gary Winnick, and I'm struggling. The point is that the first point and click adventure came about 3 years prior to this, so people had seen it up to that point. But I think this is probably the best it's been at that point.
Yeah, I mean the only things I can think of in this time frame would be like King's Quest, like that's probably like one of the other earliest games.
Yeah,
So
that's
there
kind of
really
the
wasn't a lot on
default.
there really wasn't a lot on the market as far as this is.
And my second point that I wanted, okay, I found it. It's called Enchanted Scepters by Silicon Beach Software, and that released 3 years prior to Maniac Mansion. But anyway, the point when you mentioned Zork, so Zork eventually evolved from that text-based simulator. I don't even know what to call it. There was a point and click adventure called Return to Zork. And you made a comment earlier about how you just pick everything up because that's what you do. In the very beginning of that game, one of the first things you can do is there's a plant on the side of the road and you can pick it up and take it with you. However, if you do that, you screw yourself. So you have to get a knife and you have to dig up the plant because you need it to be alive.
Oh.
And so I had that in the back of my mind constantly while playing this game. I was like, I'm going to pick something up that I'm not supposed to. I'm going to screw myself. And so I tried playing this game so many times. I started over again. And then finally, like Chris, I gave up and I was like, if I'm going to talk about this game, I need to use a walkthrough.
Well, and there's so many specific things that have to occur that requires you to just have hours and hours of trial and error.
Yes.
Like there's where when the kid has his package delivered, and a lot of these are just time based, right? So at one point, like the son is like ordering this package, and it comes in the mail, and he rings the doorbell, and he goes, "Oh, that's probably my package." And it's this little cutscene where he informs you that there's something at the door. Well, if you don't beat him to the door, he ends up getting the package, and if you don't acquire that package, you can't get the staple or the stamps off of it, which means that you can't mail off
The
like
The
manuscript.
demo,
the
the demo
manuscript
tap.
or the
The,
demo tape. Like
yeah.
so like you basically lock yourself out of certain endings to the game by not completing these things.
So similarly, he got the package before me, so I restarted. And then I ran down there and I picked up the package, but apparently I didn't know you're supposed to pull the stamps off of it
Yep.
first. I didn't do that. So I
If
don't know.
if
I don't know if you can go back.
you only
Yeah,
need the
it took me
stamps if you
several
need that.
saves.
Yeah, you only need the stamps off of it. Like for my playthrough, I didn't need the stamps at all.
Right, and there are ways to beat it. Like I think one of the default ways to beat it is to just shove the meteor in a car or like in the pool and kill him. It's like you can do that regardless of whether or not you have like this character special endings.
Which
Hmm.
I had no idea the meteor was even an interactable object. I
Yep.
just figured because by the time I got into the meteor's room, it was gone. So I
Oh,
figured
you
the
never
meteor was.
saw it.
The only time I saw the meteor was in cutscenes.
Oh yeah, you do see it.
So
But
So
yeah,
I think
there are ways to do it like without special characters.
we kind of talked about this game as much as we can about replaying it. So let's take a break, and when we come back, we will give our final thoughts and final impressions on this game. All right, welcome back, everybody. We are in our final segment of the show where we give our final thoughts. However, I need to make myself look like a liar because I had something else I wanted to say, but I closed out our last segment too early. So I wanted to see what the differences were between the PC and the NES version because I played it on Steam. I saw the PC version, and the NES version looks similar. The layout is the same. The game is basically the same, but it looks so different. Like I said, it had to be completely redesigned, all the characters. And I know I mentioned that the Famicom port was essentially a brand new, complete redesign, but the NES characters are so different by comparison. In the interview I had with Gary Winnick, he mentioned that he designed the characters with exceptionally large heads so they could convey expression easier. And that's definitely lost with this port. While the proportions are still off, they don't look anywhere remotely human, they're nowhere near what they are in the original version. In the PC port, their heads are humongous.
yeah, when you showed me the pictures of like the PC version versus what I was playing, I was like, oh wow, that's like and the first time you showed me the picture was actually when you showed me a screenshot of you looking at the old rusty key on the chandelier, where on the NES version, I couldn't see that at all. Like the NES version, the graphics are so
Yeah, so
blocky and
my best comparison would to be like the NES is a stripped down version of what
hmm
like the original Monkey Island looked like, it's like, how like everything was very square and pixelated, but Guybrush still had facial features and everything. Like Maniac Mansion is the same way on the NES, where everything is just kind of this square shaped body, but like the facial features are almost non-existent on the characters.
Yeah, like
I think comparing it to Monkey Island is perfect. Sorry to cut you off, Chris.
oh no, I was saying like it's funny because you're saying the NES version came out after the PC version, but if you look at the PC version, it looks like a polished, cleaned up, new version of the NES one. Like the NES one is kind of bad.
Yeah, the port definitely took some downgrades, but I wouldn't call it inferior.
No,
Even though
Graphically, because like
using-
I said, I didn't even know the key was
graphically-
up there.
yeah, there's definitely some loss of graphical fidelity.
Gameplay wise, it's the exact same, I assume.
Yeah, it's essentially the exact same game. I did mention that there were some things that Nintendo censored, but all in all, the game is still there.
Yeah.
So, Chris, why don't you give us your final thoughts on this game?
I really liked it. It's definitely a dorky dad game where I like the humor in it, and I really love the fact that this is an old game where it's not like Mario where you're just racing to the end and everybody takes the same path. Like this game would have been. I mean, it was fun just hearing what you guys did different than what I did different, and it would have been a lot of fun to actually play this game when everybody was playing this game and you got to compare notes and try to figure out the right path without using the internet. And like this game would have been very exciting back in the day. And I think it definitely still holds up. And I would love a co-op version of this game where each of us, like all three of us playing at the same time and each of us picking a different character and acting independently instead of
interesting to see
instead of having to
get it done.
Right, yeah. I would like imagine like the same way like people play games now where they use Discord to talk or I don't know, it's just like any of the other
It'd be kind of
co-op.
even more interesting because you could have people picking up items that you need suddenly.
Exactly. And hey,
It's just like,
I got the
hey.
key for you. Meet me at the kitchen, like I think this anyways.
Yeah, that'd definitely be amazing. Chris, when you suggested this, I had some very vague memories of the game. And to be completely honest, I wasn't looking forward to playing it because I know how time consuming solving point and click adventures can be.
I had
But
see, one of the reasons I picked this because like when we were trying to think of Halloween games earlier, like spoilers everybody, like we were thinking about Halloween games since August ended, and this was one of the games I had on my list, and and one of the reasons I shot it to the front of my list is because I looked up a speed run for it, and apparently like somebody beat this game in like an hour and 10 minutes. I was like, oh, okay, if a speed runs is an hour and 10 minutes, I could probably get through it in 3 or 4 hours.
Yeah, right.
I didn't like look what the average, what the expected length of time was until we already dedicated ourselves to playing it. So my bad, everybody.
Yeah, so if you look on how long to beat, it says like 4 hours or so. But that's if you know what you're doing and maybe you aren't very experienced at maneuvering all the characters. That speedrun is ridiculous. But after
Yeah.
playing this game in its entirety and watching another replay with different characters and being able to see the different interactions that take place within the same story structure, this just blew my mind, especially when I put it into context of this game being released in 1987 and two guys sat around with what had to be an obscene amount of paper and pen mapping all these different possibilities.
Yeah, the number of layers in this game is crazy.
If I get a chance to interview him again, I'm going to ask him what play testing was like and just how much time was dedicated to getting it right. And maybe I did ask that, but there's just
he mentioned it at one point, but I don't think you really got into the specifics of it.
Yeah, there's just so much that can happen in this game that maybe this might sound like hyperbole, but I would say this is a brilliant game. It's truly an
Totally.
outstanding title and definitely one of the best point and click adventures that I have ever played. So
Well, and to piggyback on that, really, one of the things I noticed, and we mentioned a couple other titles: Monkey Island, Full Throttle, Indiana Jones. This is the only one that I can think of out of all of those where don't have a specific set of actions that need to be required to beat the game. So like if we play Full Throttle, like everybody knows, like you gotta, beat the bikers up in the tunnel to, get the cave guy, to get the goggles, to end up revealing the secret passage, to move on with the game or whatever. Like this one,
It,
there's
it's
different
much
ways to
more
progress.
linear.
Yeah, every other game is much more linear. This one is like so many branching paths because you have six characters. Like there's so many different ways to beat this, and even depending on your character combination, you could have three different ways to beat the game with two of the characters you pick. So I just think that's crazy the way that this all kind of panned out.
It is almost a shame that every other title that they've done after this almost scales back how
Yeah,
how much
storyboard
they can do.
wise, like yeah.
This is an incredibly ambitious game, and they nailed it. First game, crushed it. I wish that I cared about this game when I was younger as I do now.
That's what
Ugh.
I'm saying. Man, I well, I will admit I am not a cool enough kid to have played this when I was. Well, I mean, this
Well,
game came out when I was 6.
Well,
I
yeah,
was not
that's
even
the
a
thing
cool
is
enough
like,
kid. Oh, I was just gonna say I wouldn't have been cool enough when I was in high school to have played this. Like this is something that this is one of those games that like as I've gotten older and learned to appreciate more than just one thing. Like this game is just beautiful and just really well super. I'm sorry, I'm just echoing what you just said, but yeah, it's just it's great.
Well, it wasn't a super popular game. Like it's a cult classic now.
Yeah, and to be honest, yeah, that's totally. When I was a kid, this game wasn't even on my radar. Never even heard of it. I didn't hear about it until it was a cult classic.
like that's kind of the thing though, is the fact that like this came out originally in '87. It was for the Commodore, so I mean, we're all talking about being like 4 and 6 years old or whatever, and it's just like you really wouldn't have had exposure to this title, especially because it is like this kind of under the radar adventure game. It's not a big IP, so they weren't working on Star Wars or anything else like that, and so it's like the only way you would really know this is by word of mouth or how it got out in the public and that sort of thing. And it really didn't get that much exposure, but it is just an amazingly well done game.
Absolutely. There's really not a whole lot more that can really be said. It's just such a good game, and I plan on revisiting this in the future. So guys, I think that's where we're going to go ahead and close the show unless you have anything else you want to say. What else?
Yeah, I do have an honorable mention for a another fun Halloween game. That like we didn't have time to, but time to get cover. And this is a game that most people probably haven't heard of. It's called Monster Party for the NES. It's also kind of the same vein as this game, where it's a parody of a bunch of horror movies. But it is a side scroller action game. It's super Halloweeny, super comically creepy. Check it out. It's fun.
And I have another honorable mention. It's McDonald's Treasureland Adventure. It has nothing to do with Halloween specifically, but
Well, I mean, he is dressed
it's-
up like a clown.
he is a
One day,
clown.
Corey, one day we will cover
There
that
is
game.
there is a guy that's a giant talking set of lips with a pirate hat. So you could call that a Halloween costume, I suppose.
I
That
suppose.
would that would be a sweet Halloween costume.
There are
All
treasure
right.
chests in the game.
All right. So let's go ahead and close the show. Chris, thank you for suggesting this game. Thank you both for taking the time to play through it, because this was definitely homework.
Yeah,
Yeah,
this one took a bit of time, but as always, it was quite fun to do. So
It paid
Yeah,
off.
Yeah, glad that I did it. I'm glad I can say that I've done it, even if I was a filthy casual and used a walkthrough.
Well, I don't think there's anything wrong with using a walkthrough with
No.
some of these games. They're difficult games, and not
Well, and
everybody has the time
some
to
of these are
dedicate.
just so obscure, and it's like the twisted mind of the developer, where it's like, oh yeah, I wouldn't have thought about using this and this, and I
Oh
mean,
yeah,
I
yeah,
do.
and and that is one thing that we should say. Like, you do kind of get a sense of knowing the developers of this game, because like you really get to know their sense of humor and their weird mindsets. Like when you are using two what seem to be random objects together,
Hey, you're
like
feeding wax fruit to a tentacle,
yeah,
like it's
yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, you do feel like you actually get to, and what it was two guys that wrote this game.
Ron Gilbert and Gary Winnick.
Yeah. So
the
like
main ones.
I feel like I got to know them on a certain level from playing this game.
Well, you certainly get an idea of their humor and thought
Yeah.
processes when you do this.
And that's so cool.
So everyone out there, if you want to, please follow us on Twitter at ReviewByte. That's Review BYTE. We're on iHeartRadio. If you are listening to this podcast, because I also put it up on YouTube, I go ahead and put it up there. Drop us a line. Ask for suggestions of games that you want to hear about. We want your opinion. We also have our Discord, which we talk about all the time. Join us there. Our next game will be Super Ghouls and Ghosts for the Super Nintendo. Okay, well, I think that's it. Everybody out there, thank you so much for listening.
Happy
and we will
Halloween.
see you next time.
And remember,
Happy Halloween.
you can find Chris at his house.
Okay, anyway, that's it. Bye, everybody.
Bye.